Hello everybody, Cody Demery here. Now, one of the things that inspired me by wanting to make this video today was what an incredible weekend it was this past weekend. I get to spend quality time with my family, my kids, and my wife, and I got to see some other family members that I don't always get to see as well too. It was a great weekend. And one of the things that also happened this past weekend was the acceptance speech by Mr. Jelly Roll this past weekend at the Grammy Awards. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't watch one single minute of the Grammys, but what I did watch was the acceptance speech that Jelly Roll gave. Now, I've always been a fan of Jelly Roll for years because I think there's a few reasons. Now, he's the same style of gentleman that has had to pull himself out of the gutter on many different obstacles in his life, whether it's being incarcerated, whether it's being addicted to drugs and alcohol, whether it's him having to overcome many obstacles where he thought at one point in his life that his life wasn't meant worth living in this world. Now, he also, in his lyrics, he talks about those things. In his lyrics, he talks about the faith of God. And I just resonate with a lot of his messages, and I love all of it. I love that he was at one time, as big of a man as he was, but yet his consistency, his work ethic, his dedication to becoming the best version of himself moving forwards has now dropped hundreds of pounds. And he always is humble about it. He's always grateful about it. He's always kind about it. And that's things that I just really resonate with. And I absolutely adore what I have seen from different videos, different interviews, different podcasts of what that man and how he handles himself in this world. Now, one of the things I loved the most this past weekend about his acceptance speech is how much credit and how much love he gave to, of course, what he believes in, his higher power, Jesus or God, and his wife, So I wrote down on my computer one of his quotes here so that I did it justice. And I made sure that I quoted word for word what he said in his acceptance speech. That made me tear up as I literally watched him say what he said that I'm going to say in front of you guys. I believe that music had the power to change my life, and God had the power to change my life. I want to tell y'all right now, Jesus is for everybody, and Jesus is not owned by one political party. Jesus is not owned by any music label. Jesus and anybody can have, Jesus is Jesus, and anybody can have a relationship with him. Absolutely incredible. What a kind energy to share with this world, especially coming from a man that has battled and has survived all of his obstacles in the past. It inspired me to want to make this video because I think a lot of times when people climb to the top of wherever their life takes them, wherever their battles and their obstacles lead them, I think it is absolutely incredible when they give up the humility and they give up the honor that they try and hold themselves, but they give it to something that helped them get there, like by the grace of God, as he mentioned in his acceptance speech. Now, I wrote down a few stories why that resonated with me so much. It's because, like I said, at times in my life, I didn't think I was going to be one to be able to pull myself out of the past where I used to live, whether it's addictions, mental health issues, or even, some of the battles that I didn't think I was ever going to overcome. Now, one of the stories I want to share with people is a story of when I was at a house party in high school. I think I was about 15, 16 years old. Now, this story happened because I was being intoxicated. I was most likely being upset with myself or whatever happened at the house party. But at this house party, I started to storm off because I was under the influence of alcohol, a lot of it probably. And whatever reason, I thought it was a great idea to try and walk home from this house party that happened to be outside of our city, our home city where I'm from. And it was about at least a 20-minute drive. and I had this great idea that I was going to walk home. And I started stumbling down the highway. And of course, I'm, intoxicated, probably swaying back and forth on the shoulder, probably not being very cautious of my surroundings at this moment. And then, something just happened. Like a blink of an eye. While I was walking on the shoulder of the highway, I got sideswiped by a car that was driving down the road. Now, I remember getting spun around, doing like a 360, because the back of the car and the velocity of the car hit my back right leg, and it spun me around because of the speed of the car. Now, as I was, coming to face forward again where the car was still driving forward, I was falling forward, and the side view mirror on the car is one of the biggest things that must have hit me, thankfully, because it started falling and it was trailing the car as the car was driving away. Now, as I spun around and started facing the highway the same direction where I was going, I was falling down, and as I was falling down, I seen that car still speeding away. Now, I had the knowledge at least, and the composure at least, to be able to get back up, dust myself off, and be able to call the RCMP officers and let them know what happened. And, after they picked me up, thankfully after only a few minutes, they went down the road and they found the side view mirror. Now, I've thought about that moment a few times in my life over the past few years. Now, even though it happened over 15 years ago in my life, I can't explain how close I could have been to, maybe my life not being mine today. How lucky I came to maybe not being, paralyzed or losing a leg, whatever it was. And I think one of the reasons why his acceptance speech, Jelly Rolls, struck a chord in me so much is because there's been so many stories in my life that I don't know the explanation of what happened, the reason why it happened. All I have is just gratitude that I'm still able to share these kind of stories like I'm doing here on YouTube today with all of you, whoever listens. Now, one would call that a miracle, I would say, at times, and I consider it one. But I also consider it being looked after from whatever higher power I believe in, whether it's God, Creator, my spiritual team, whatever it is. I consider that a blessing of being watched over that time. Now, I woke up the next morning with my mother hanging out beside my hospital bed, and I left the hospital that day with a gigantic bruise on my thigh. But I was able to walk out of that hospital the next morning. Another story that I'd love to share, of course, is the multiple times that I used to do hard drugs for multiple days in a row, without drinking any fluids besides alcohol, without taking any food in my system, without taking any substance into my body besides the hard drugs and the alcohol that I was consuming at the times. And then there has been multiple times in my life where I thought I was having an overdose because of all the things I was taking in my body. Let alone the countless times that I used to abuse and mess with hard drugs that I could have been laced with any sort of other substance that I didn't know what was in those hard drugs. That's another moment, many different moments in my life that I consider different lessons. Because I've heard of different stories, especially over the past few years, of people unfortunately, going out one night and somebody experimented with something that maybe they experimented with before, and for them not being so lucky the next hour or whatever it is, because something in whatever they were experimenting with wasn't what their body wanted to be able to handle. And so maybe there's times people have lost their life because of that. The stories that I look back on now, and that I'm just thankful and I'm grateful for those moments to still be here and be able to share these stories. I don't take it for granted ever, because I know there's many times in my life that could have not been the case. Another story, of course, is when I was in high school again, and where me and a few buddies were driving a vehicle, and I was behind the driver wheel, and we hit a pole, and this metal pole bent around the windshield frame on the passenger side, and this metal pole went through the windshield of the car we were driving and stopped about a foot in front of my face. Now this metal pole could have easily took probably, unfortunately, my life away. And I don't know what it was either at that moment. But that was another moment that I was given another chance to be able to still be here in this world. Now, 9 times out of 10, put myself in that same circumstance, maybe I'm not here anymore. Maybe I don't get to live the life that I get to live now. Maybe I don't have the beautiful kids that I cherish. Maybe I don't get to have that beautiful wife that I cherish. Maybe I don't get to have the life that I consider a dream right now. If that metal pole that went around the windshield frame on the passenger side and at my head bent through the windshield and it stopped about a foot away from my head. Another story, of course, a car accident that me and one of my best friends were involved in when we were about 18, about a week before grade 12, where unfortunately I was intoxicated and I was behind the wheel, and we eventually hit a tree going about 112 to 116 kilometers per hour. Now that's also another story that a lot of times, more chances than not, those stories don't work out the way that it worked out for us. It was a story that I had to heal from a lot of trauma for a lot of years to overcome that, to thankfully be able to be where I am to this day now. It was about one of the very first times in my life that I actually prayed. I didn't grow up in a family that went to church, that did praying, all this kind of stuff. I grew up in a family, a household that believed in a higher power. But that's as far as the conversation would go. I've never in my life before this accident have I ever prayed in my life. But while my best friend was in the hospital, trying to fight for his life, it was about the first and major time in my life that I actually prayed. I prayed for him to recover. I prayed for him to be okay. I prayed for our lives to, still remain and being friends with each other after all of our situations that we're involved in. I never prayed for anything else in my life besides, that at that point. And, another thing that just makes me believe in the power of a higher power that much more is that very friend of mine that I prayed for him to overcome his injuries of the car crash we were involved in years ago. We may not always get to have phone calls with each other. We may not always get to hang out because he runs a construction business and I run my businesses. But we're always busy. We're doing our family thing. We're doing our relationships. And we're just trying to take care of the people who we need to take care of in this world. But another little sign above today that I had was that I was leaving the coffee shop and I got my coffee and I'm in a good mood. I just went to the gym. I'm on my way to my home office so I can do this video, so I can have meetings, so I can send emails, so I can do all the stuff that I actually love to do. And who do I drive by right after I leave the coffee shop? My best pal that was in the accident together with me all those years ago, when a lot of medical professionals, doctors didn't think he was going to necessarily survive our accident that we had together back in the day. But of course, I leave the coffee shop. I had a smile on my face. Life is good. I got my regular coffee, and who drives by? My buddy Regan. We give each other a wave and smile, and that right there is priceless. That's so priceless. Now, one of the things that still astonishes me to this day is when we were in the midst of that car accident and when we were in the midst of him, being in a deep sleep, trying to recover, There was a moment in my life years ago where I thought my life was better off not being here. So there's a time in my life that I thought taking my own life was the answer. Of course, thankfully, by the gracious of a higher power, I was wrong. That wasn't the decision that I needed to make that time. Thankfully, I woke up the next morning with my life still of my own. But it was one of the lessons that I learned in my life, that we're all here for a reason. We're here for a purpose. We're here for whatever it is, whatever the stories, whatever the skills, whatever the talents it is for us to teach this world. And, it still sends shivers down my spine. All these stories that I have in my mind that I share, from time to time with different people, like me sharing in front of this video. You want the truth? It's not easy for me to share all these stories, but they're so powerful. They're so powerful because they keep telling me to keep moving forward. Don't give up. Don't stop. Don't ever give up, because we're here for a reason. And those stories that I just shared with you, of course, the acceptance speech of Jelly Roll this past weekend, it all just really resonated. It made me tear up when I heard Jelly Roll thank, Jesus for helping him. And another story, part that he added in his acceptance speech I wrote down here, so I would also do it justice. Because once again, it pulls on my heartstrings, it resonates with me, and I believe it's another thing that I can relate with. So in his acceptance speech, he also said, "I would have never changed my life without you. I would have ended up dead or in jail. I'd have killed myself if it wasn't for you and Jesus. I thank you for that." When somebody is at the highest peak of their life, has nothing but gratitude and grace, to be able to say thank you to his higher power, God, Jesus, Creator, whatever you believe in, and his wife, for pulling him from his life that he used to live. You put those two things together, and you pluck on my heartstrings in every different angle, every different level. Because I'm also a person who believes my beautiful wife that I call my partner now is somebody who's helped me also pull myself out of the life that I used to live. When we first started getting together, I still struggled with my addictions. I still struggled with who I was as a young person. I still struggled with the traumas that I had going in my life and in and out of my life. But she believed that I had the ability to be able to change things around. She believed I had the ability to recover. She believed I had the ability to be able to do what I do now in front of thousands of people. Now, by the grace of a higher power, by the grace of my beautiful wife, that's why, what Jelly Roll said this past weekend on his acceptance speech for his Grammy roles, or his Grammy Awards, that's why they resonated so hard with me. Because I've been a person who has been lost in my own life as well. But because I found my faith and, been able to be watched over, had a good person in my life that believed in me, I was also able to turn my life around. And that's a lot of power. And I think every single person in this world holds that power. Whether or not you believe you are meant for great things in this world, I believe you are. I believe a lot of people are meant for great things. Sometimes the biggest battle is for them to believe it themselves. Sometimes the biggest battle is for them to get out of their own way and just start stepping in the right direction for them to be able to unlock their full potential of themselves. So, thank you, Jelly Roll, for reminding everyone have a little bit of faith in your higher power. It's a beautiful thing. And thank you for reminding us that the people who've been with us from the beginning are those who we should never forget to thank as well. If this message, if this video resonated with you guys, please give it a like, please give it a share. Please give it a comment for what resonated with you the most in this video. And if you love it, let people know you love it. This video wasn't easy for me, but man, did it feel good doing it. Thank you, everybody. Once you believe you have the ability and the capacity to do great things in this world. That's when I truly believe life can become limitless. Thank you, everybody.